Here's a look at some of the headlines making the world spin this week. What a week it was. There was another high-profile school shooting in Iowa this week with one sixth-grade student killed. A massive earthquake in Japan, as I mentioned. A harrowing crash on an airport runway in Japan. And Mike Johnson did some performative tough talking at the southern U.S. border. What's your plan, Mike? What's your plan? But we all know the story you want to hear. Oh yeah, the one that's had its own countdown and carries with it a rabid fan base of morbid devotees. Jeffrey Epstein's list, or rather a flight log, or rather a list of known associates, or rather a list of some people who might have been around him in some fashion, or even just mentioned by him during the course of his lifetime as a sexual predator and jet-setting financier. And that was all set to be released this week, and oh boy, was the countdown to that list exciting or what. I bet some people held list parties. I know you did, you sickos. This all stemmed from the U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska's December decision that all of the information should be unsealed because there was no legal justification for keeping it from the ravenous public hungry for names to skewer. The documents were part of the 2015 civil lawsuit from Virginia Giuffre against Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in prison now. The list of names include associates and accusers, and a person being on the list doesn't mean they are accused of any wrongdoing. That's key. It could just mean that they knew, talked with, or rubbed shoulders with Epstein, a rich and powerful person who liked to be around rich and powerful people, or even just claimed that he knew rich and powerful people. And again, it could mean that they are an accuser or a victim of Epstein's sex trafficking. All these things that you should keep in mind when discussing this, but no one will. So names like Cate Blanchett, Cameron Diaz, Stephen Hawking, and even George Lucas aren't necessarily there for nefarious reasons. And let's be honest, George Lucas probably wandered into one of Epstein's party like it was a mall food court or a random documentary. All right, and this goes for even the names you expected to, and be honest, wanted to be on some devil's list of demons. This has led to a Rorschach's test for everyone based on news headlines, a test that people like Aaron Rodgers failed. But more on that later in the show. There are some names that have popped up in the details of the unsealed depositions and testimonies, and their described actions do merit scorn at the very least, or the fervor of pitchfork-wielding mobs at best. I suggest you read them if you can, and if you can stomach the horrifying actions described, and decide for yourself. And please, someone read the accounts of Donald Trump to Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, because his Covenant Eyes app is probably blocking the content. None of this is me suggesting that any of this is a nothing burger. The sex trafficking done by Epstein and Maxwell is evil, and there absolutely were rich and powerful people taking part. Still, this list didn't necessarily provide those names, confirm that everyone you want to go down will go down, or reveal who killed Epstein. Discuss with caution. Unless, of course, you're Aaron Rodgers. Again, more on that later. And now to the calm, collected waters of the Middle East. Where to begin, and how can this end? Israel has announced their plans for the next phase of the war as if this were an ongoing superhero franchise. Perhaps the second coming of Christ is just part of the multiverse. The plan includes a brand new approach in the north of Gaza and, shall we say, a more narrow-focused approach to rooting out Hamas leaders bunkered down in the south. All this while displaced Palestinians are just trying to survive a humanitarian crisis, with some telling CNN this week they would rather go home and just die with dignity. The United States has continued to support Israel's right to fight a war with the hostage-hoarding Hamas following the horrific October 7th attack on Israel, while the rift between the countries does continue to grow. In a report by CNN's Jennifer Hansler, a U.S. State Department spokesperson said that the results in Gaza on protecting citizens does not seem to match where Israel's intentions are, which I guess is State Department speak for, we've asked the IDF to be cool, dude, and they're not listening. Last week, South Africa sued Israel in the World Court at The Hague on the grounds of, quote, alleged violations of the Convention on Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to Gaza. To make most Americans interested, that's like if Israel was on Epstein's flight log. The lawsuit prompted White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby to respond by saying the suit was meritless, counterproductive, and completely without basis in any fact whatsoever. His word, whatsoever. That's one do-your-research comment away from making him sound like he's a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience. And look, I did not read all 84 pages of the filing. I read the title page, so I'm open to more expert opinions on this, or, the World Court justices, who I assume wear cowls and may or may not be Eternals. But Kirby's response has the energy of the getaway driver saying, my friends just said they were popping into the bank to withdraw cash, and I believe them. We'll keep our eye on this. And all of this is a lot to take in. So let's finish with something lighthearted and fun like they do on local news, like a cat learning to make English muffins or an old lady living to 111 because she cooks steaks and whiskey 3 times a day. All right, here we go. And finally, 2 bombs killed 84 people in the Iranian city of Kerman this week. The deaths, as well as injuries to nearly 300 other people, took place at the burial site of Qasem Soleimani, a military commander killed in a U.S. airstrike 4 years ago. Iran immediately blamed Israel for the strike, with their president warning that Israel would, quote, pay a heavy price for this crime and the crimes you have committed. A not-so-subtle reminder of the region's general thoughts towards the Jewish state. However, the next day, ISIS claimed responsibility. That's right, ISIS. Remember them? This is like a WWE superstar showing up on Raw years after they left. That's ISIS's music. The media wing of ISIS titled their statement and killed them wherever you find them. And in it took responsibility for the murders at the ceremony commemorating Soleimani's death 4 years ago. And they said they did it in the name of taking out polytheists. That's right. This is having to do with ISIS's thoughts on the Shia branch of Islam being heretical in an ongoing, maybe never-ending religious war. So, no response yet from Iran at the time that I wrote this on the ISIS claim, and no apology for blaming Israel. Though it just takes you a few clicks into Twitter responses to get into the theories that ISIS did this for Israel. So, stay tuned. But at least an expansion of regional combat is on hold for one more day, folks. I don't have the energy to get into the Lebanon and U.S. military entanglements, so let's wrap it up. There's a lot of death and war afoot. I'd love to just do silly stories about Trump's diapers and his name being kept off states' primary ballots, but this is where the news spotlight has taken us. So keep your head up, and hey, spread some love today. But that's the news. Alden, anything you want to chat about.